Hello, everybody. This is Fernando for the latest aliens and UFOs video. All right, let's go ahead and let's continue with part 2 of chapter 10 from the book UFO Sightings by Alan Baker. This one, once again, doing with the theme associated with bodies of evidence. Now, we just talked about on part 1 that footage involving that infamous Roswell footage, that alien autopsy, the one that gained a little bit of sensation when it came out in the late 90s. This chapter will continue that part, and it'll analyze and pretty much scrutinize that footage along with some of the other information associated with it. So it's a great look into the past when it came to something that pretty much became a hallmark in the UFO world, and then now today is, of course, something that is heavily criticized. And so let's see what this part 2 says. And I'd love to hear what your own thoughts and comments are, and then I'll give my own as well. So here is part 2, and then here's what it states. Eventually, through TV producer Robert Kiviat, who had bought the rights to the footage, Stanton Friedman managed to view it, along with Dr. Bruce Maccabee, an experienced UFO investigator and film analyst. As it turned out, President Truman was not present after all. Neither was there any footage of a disc on the ground, which had been described by other people. As Friedman states in Top Secret Magic, the actual amount of footage was also different from what he had been led to believe. Originally, Santini had claimed there were 15 10-minute reels. Then the story was 14 7-minute reels, then became 22 3-minute reels, but several had film that couldn't be used. As Friedman and Maccabee carefully reviewed the film at Maccabee's home in Washington, D.C., it became clear to them that there were a number of discrepancies between what they were watching and the testimony of the many eyewitnesses to the Roswell incident. For example, the alien lying on the autopsy table bore little resemblance to the creatures described at Roswell. The body in the film had 6 fingers and 6 toes, whereas the Roswell witnesses had described beings with 4 long fingers and no opposable thumbs. There was also a good deal of wrecked hardware in the film, including the infamous I-beams with their strange symbols. But even these did not resemble very closely the material described by the eyewitnesses, including Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr., who had actually handled some of it when he was a small boy. These I-beams have been made of strange, balsa-like substance with purplish symbols. The I-beams in the film, though, were obviously metallic, with the symbols stamped onto them. The symbols themselves were reminiscent of Greek letters, but on close inspection seemed to contain, rather damningly it would seem, the word video, albeit disguised by various additional geometric lines. There was also a pair of apparent control panels with large indentations in the form of 6-fingered hands. When challenged over these discrepancies, Santilli changed the date and the location of the alleged crash several times. The cameraman was never located, and Friedman seriously doubts that he is even alive. As far as the autopsy itself is concerned, there are serious problems here too. There are 3 possible alternatives. The film shows a genuine extraterrestrial, or it shows a human corpse with some sort of abnormality, or it is a special effect, in short, an artificial model. The second alternative is not outlandish as it sounds, since the alien in the film shows many signs of a genetic defect known as Turner's syndrome. For instance, the body, which is apparently female, has no breasts, unusual earlobes, a wide chest, and an excess of skin at the base of the neck, all suggestive of Turner's syndrome, according to Freeman. In fact, these unusual features notwithstanding, the person on the autopsy table bore a much greater resemblance to a human being than a genuine extraterrestrial alien. She had a definitive nose, rather than the air holes described in aliens, pronounced ear flaps, which were not really described by Roswell witnesses, and her eyes, although rather large, were much smaller than those of the creatures described at Roswell. There are yet further problems with the manner in which the autopsy itself is conducted. For instance, as the medical personnel examined the cadaver's jet black eyes, they quickly discover lens-like coverings over them too quickly. In fact, as if they knew what to expect beforehand. These coverings are then taken out immediately, with no attempt made to discover how they might be attached or whether their removal might damage the eyeballs. Avoiding any further unnecessary damage to the body would surely be the paramount consideration. When the abdominal cavity is opened, a number of strange organs are revealed, along with a cartilaginous wishbone-like structure in the chest. What follows is astonishing, giving the premise that this is a being from another world. The examiner takes his scalpel and goes to work on the body with what looks like incredible ineptitude, as if he were filleting a joint of meat instead of carefully dissecting an utterly unique scientific specimen. The unidentified organs are excised with unseemly haste, pulled out of the abdominal cavity with no attempt to ascertain their supporting structures, and then tossed into waiting specimen dishes. It hardly takes a PhD in forensic medicine to see that an autopsy on an alien being simply would not have been conducted in such a laughably slapdash manner. A genuine autopsy would have taken days, weeks, even months to perform, with the subject preserved at each stage in the procedure to the best of the science ability at the time. It would have been conducted with the utmost care, with the information gained from each step being collated and evaluated before a decision on how to proceed could be made. The autopsy film shows no measurements being taken. The organs removed from the cadaver are not even weighed. And what if Jack Barnett, the cameraman who allegedly took the film? French researcher Nicolas Maillard has discovered that a Jack Barnett did indeed film Elvis Presley in Cleveland in 1955, but he did not own the rights to that footage. They actually belonged to the disc jockey Bill Randall, who sold them to Santilli in 1992. According to Friedman, Jack Barnett had been employed as a cameraman by Fox Movietone News and then later by NBC. He had been a war correspondent in Europe during the Second World War, but he was never in the military. He died in Chicago in 1967. Another name for the cameraman, Jack Barrett, popped up in the course of the Roswell autopsy affair, and Nicholas Maillard looked into this also. Barrett worked as a grip for Columbia Pictures in Hollywood for 35 years, his military service having ended in 1945. He died in Los Angeles in 1995. Mallard submitted Barrett's signature to a graphologist, along with the copies of the labels from the autopsy film canisters. The graphologist concluded that Barrett could have written the labels. Friedman asked if the autopsy could have been stored in some Hollywood vault, perhaps some science film. Speaking of Hollywood, the film has been shown to a large number of special effects experts, the vast majority of whom are of the opinion that the alien is a manufactured model. Interestingly, Friedman also reports a conversation he had with Richard Doty, whom we encountered earlier, who claimed to have seen the film in the early 1980s, and even then it was known not to be of aliens. The extraterrestrial alternative then slips out of the picture, leaving either the malformed human or the special effects model. We will have to wait and see if any further information comes to light, which might enable us to make a definitive decision on the true origin of this intriguing footage. In the meantime, the extra attention that the UFO phenomenon has attracted as a result of the film is a rather mixed blessing in view of the virtual certainty that the Roswell autopsy footage is not, after all, the long-anticipated smoking gun that could reveal the truth to an expectant world. Then that's it. Let's go ahead and we'll pause that here as this ends this part associated with the Roswell autopsy footage. So let me give my own thoughts on that too. It was a nice little summation. I again went into an analytical mode, critiquing things associated with that footage. I'm of the opinion that it is also false. I mean, I saw the footage originally when it was released, and then I've seen it, and it's there on YouTube even now. I've seen it sporadically throughout several years or so, probably just a handful of times. I, too, got the impression of what this chapter was stating, that it is fabricated. Like, it's, in other words, something where it's shot and it's using a model, and those are probably actors or friends, whomever, that are doing the actual autopsy, and it's just filmed in such a way to make it look much more dated or make it look like it's much more authentic, but in a way it comes across as more fake. I think the biggest red flag that I remember when I saw that footage was whenever the camera kept pointing to the doctors. Like, in other words, it was pointing to them instead of the actual alien. And so it made me wonder, like, why. That made it seem like it was more of a movie thing rather than something real. Like, you would think that the footage itself would be static, like it would be multiple angles and maybe just focusing on the body of the alien itself. Why would we care if a doctor would be zooming in and out and you would see the expression of the doctor as they're doing the incisions and so on? Like, it just definitely seemed more movie like. And so that's at least the impression that I got. But hearing some of the other information here about the I beams, the quote unquote I beams, and then the strange symbols, how those contradicted with what other people were stating was really there, along with the alien itself and the number of digits that it had, how that was different as well. All that stuff again points to it being fabricated. Now, I don't think that if it's not an alien, the other suggestion was that it's a human, somebody born with that Turner's syndrome. If so, that definitely takes things to another macabre level. Like, you were literally seeing an autopsy of a person rather than an alien. I don't think it's that either. I think it's just fabricated. Like, whatever was happening, somebody created a really good model. They spent a little money on it, and then of course it was used to make a good video to sell to make even more money off of it. And but the mystery as to who the cameraman was and so on, but that just remains up in the air. So is everything that this gentleman Santilli was mentioning, like in terms of dates and locations and other information changing the reels of the film. All of it just points to too many red flags, too good to be true. And that's why to this day, the footage itself is still considered highly skeptical. But let me know what you guys think. Post it in the comments below what you ultimately think of that footage as well. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.